The lying Putlo continues to pretend that it was not he who invaded Ukraine in 2014, annexed Crimea and started a war in Donbass, after which, in February 2022, he launched an open offensive against Kyiv. Now, when his criminal gang can receive a large-scale rebuff from the long-range weapons of Ukraine's allies, it crawled into the alleys of St. Petersburg, from where it threatened NATO with war. If this decision is made, it will mean nothing less than the direct participation of NATO countries, the United States, European countries in the war in Ukraine. This is their direct participation. And this, of course, significantly changes the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States, European countries are fighting Russia. The little rat growled and darted into the bunker. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer responded in a way that would be heard not so much in the Kremlin as in third world countries. We are not looking for any conflict with Russia, this is not in the least part of our plans. But they started this conflict, and Ukraine has the right to self-defense. On Friday, Ukraine was the main issue at Starmer's meeting with US President Biden in Washington. Peskov has already babbled that all decisions have long been made, and Putin's advisor Karaganov sprinkled nuclear ash on his skull, threatening to throw a nuclear weapon at Ukraine and attack Berlin with missiles. At the same time, not a single deep-sea expert considers attacks on Ukraine with North Korean or Iranian weapons to be raising the stakes. Formally, the trigger was the delivery of 220 Iranian ballistic missiles to Russia, which Moscow could use against Kyiv as early as October. The White House notes that threats to Ukraine are evolving. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby warned, "The security landscape has changed. It's not changing, it won't change, it has changed. And that's why we're doing everything we can to make sure Ukraine can defend itself." End of quote. It's no longer possible to fight with your hands tied. The rules of war must change in favor of the one defending himself. And in the foreseeable future, what the Kremlin fears so much will fall upon the cave cities. The system is trembling so much so that even good Russians have quarreled among themselves. FSB provocateur Volkov accused Khodorkovsky's former PR man Leonid Nevzlin of ordering his beating in Vilnius. And the Khodorkovskyites have pounced on the Navalnyites with counter-accusations, throwing rotten herrings. If the special opposition sparked like that, imagine how it short-circuited at the very top. There is a feeling that the Scalp and Storm Shadow missile strikes will turn the deep-sea dwellers' idea of the victorious nature of the war upside down, making them horrified by the real fruits of this adventure. Putin demands to push the Ukrainian armed forces out of the Kursk region, while simultaneously advancing on Pokrovsk, but how relevant will all this be when large cities start exploding? And even if the Kremlin doesn't care about them, it definitely doesn't care about Moscow. And it will be the first to be hit. Drone flights have already demonstrated the power and might of the inflated Kyiv air defense, so the anticipation of fun is hardly deceptive. These fears somehow overshadowed Trump's unsuccessful performance at the debates with Harris, who caught him on the hook and butchered him like an old tuna. Donald was so offended that he has now refused to participate in the debates with Kamala, for whom, according to a Reuters poll, 47% of respondents are now ready to vote, and 42% for Trump. Among respondents who have heard anything about the debates, 53% gave the victory to Harris and 24% to Trump. A torn ear did not help, and less than 2 months before the election day, confusion reigns in the Republican camp. But this is nothing compared to the growing tension near the Kremlin. The nuclear argument is the last one that Putin's gang is frantically waving. In response, the Pentagon is modeling the possible consequences of nuclear strikes on Russia and Eastern Europe, and American companies, by order of the Treasury Department, are disconnecting the cave from their cloud services and software. After the war, the deep-sea dwellers will find themselves not even in the 90s of the last century, but in the impassable 60s, if not in the 40s at all. Technological backwardness, multiplied by total destruction and raised to the power of aggressive crime, will finish off the post-Soviet zone from within, driving its population under the bunk, from where there will be no escape for several generations. But while Putin roars and Solovyov rages, while the Ostankino needle radiates hatred and boys in panties kill Ukrainians, the war will continue. But a wedge is driven out with a wedge, and the illusion of impunity with the horror of retribution. The war is scheduled to end in the fall. To do this, missiles must fly into the very heart of the cave, striking the virus of imperial victory madness. Only existential horror, grief and suffering of a mass of worthless people can awaken this sleeping mind that gave birth to a monster.